The maid arrived at work with her son, and the millionaire boss's gesture made everyone cry. The first light of dawn stretched across the eastern sky, washing the small coastal town of Oregon in a pale, golden glow. The sound of distant waves mingled with a ship's horn, gently waking the sleepy streets. In a tiny third-floor apartment, Emma Carter opened her eyes, her shoulders still heavy from a short and restless night. Beside her bed, in a worn wooden crib, her 18-month-old son Liam slept peacefully, his small fists curled, his face calm and angelic. Emma smiled softly, bending to kiss his forehead. It was one of the few moments of peace she still allowed herself. Since the man who once promised her the world had vanished without a word, Emma had learned to stand alone. She worked endlessly, cleaning, washing, scrubbing, to keep a roof over their heads and milk on the table. Her job at the seaside home of Ethan Miller, a gifted but reclusive architect, was her only steady source of income. Every morning she would leave Liam with Mrs. Wallace, the elderly neighbor who loved them like family. But this morning, just as Emma finished making a bottle of milk, the phone rang. Mrs. Wallace's voice was weak and raspy. "Emma, dear, I'm afraid I can't watch Liam today. I'm feeling quite ill. Just a little flu, I hope." Emma froze. There was no one else to turn to, and missing a day of work could cost her the job she desperately needed. She sat in silence for a moment, then looked at her sleeping son and whispered, "You're coming to work with Mommy today, my little man." She dressed quickly, pulling on a plain sweater and jeans, packing a small bag with Liam's things. Outside, the air smelled of salt, and the cries of seagulls echoed across the brightening sky. On the early bus ride, Emma held Liam close, her eyes drifting toward the misty line where the sea met the horizon. In her mind, she rehearsed the day's tasks. Mop the floors, wash the windows, clean the drapes. Everything had to be perfect, as always. Through the fogged bus window, Ethan's house by the sea slowly came into view, large, modern, and silent. What Emma didn't know was that this ordinary morning would mark the beginning of everything that would change her and her son's lives forever. By 8 in the morning, Emma stepped off the bus, carrying Liam in her arms as the sea breeze tangled through her soft brown hair. The narrow path leading to Ethan Miller's seaside house was quiet enough that she could hear the sound of her own footsteps on the stone walkway. The modern glass house stood against the pale blue sky, its large windows reflecting the muted glow of early daylight. Emma unlocked the back door with the key Ethan had trusted her with. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oak wood and old coffee. She set Liam down safely in a corner of the kitchen with a few small toys she had packed. "Be good, sweetheart. Mommy will finish work soon," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. The morning passed in a rhythm of water running, cloths wiping, and Liam's occasional babbling. Emma worked quietly, polishing the tables, vacuuming the rugs, arranging books in perfect order. Everything was calm until the sound of a key turning echoed through the hall. She froze. Ethan wasn't supposed to be home. According to his schedule, he was still in Seattle for 2 more days. Her heart raced. She glanced at the kitchen corner. Liam was gone. "Liam?" she called softly. No answer. "Liam, where are you?" Panic rose in her chest. Emma hurried through the hall, scanning every corner of the vast house. Then she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. A laugh. Not Liam's high-pitched giggle, but a man's laugh, warm, deep, and alive. She followed the sound into the living room. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, casting golden patterns on the floor. There, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, was Ethan Miller, in his gray suit, still wearing his tie, laughing as Liam tugged at it like it was the most fascinating toy in the world. Emma stood at the doorway, speechless. The man who had always seemed distant and formal was now smiling, genuinely, freely, his eyes softened by something almost tender. "So you like my tie, huh?" Ethan said, his voice light, teasing. "It's rather expensive, you know, but I suppose I can share." Liam giggled again. Ethan looked up and caught Emma's gaze. For a second, surprise flickered across his face, then turned into a faint smile. "Good morning, Emma," he said calmly. "I didn't know we had such a young visitor today." Emma blushed, stammering. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Wallace is sick, and I had no one else to leave Liam with. I know it was unprofessional." He lifted a hand gently. "It's fine. Really? I don't mind. To be honest, the laughter is nice. The house has been too quiet lately." There was something in his tone, a weight beneath the words, a kind of quiet sadness that Emma couldn't quite name. He picked up a toy car Liam had dropped, handed it back with a small smile, and said softly, "A quiet house isn't always a happy one, Miss Carter. Sometimes it just needs a little life." Emma said nothing. Her heart fluttered, unsure why that sentence struck so deeply. She smiled faintly in response, and Liam laughed again, the sound bright and pure, as if his tiny laughter had unknowingly bridged the silent distance between two lonely hearts on that unexpected morning by the sea. In the days that followed, something subtle began to change inside the house by the sea. The stillness that once filled the air was slowly replaced by the soft laughter of little Liam, the clinking of spoons against his cereal bowl, and from time to time, the surprisingly gentle tone of Ethan Miller's voice. At first, Emma kept her distance, careful, reserved, the way a good employee should be. But Ethan no longer seemed like the cold, untouchable man she had imagined. He started appearing in the kitchen more often, asking simple questions like, "Does he like bananas better than apples?" Or, "Do you take sugar in your coffee, Emma?" Small, meaningless words, perhaps. Yet they carried warmth she hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, while Emma was dusting the living room shelves, Liam crawled over to Ethan, who was typing at his desk. The boy held out a bright red wooden block, his favorite toy, and opened his tiny hand. Ethan looked down, surprised, then smiled and set his pen aside. He knelt on the floor beside the boy, building towers out of the colorful blocks. From across the room, Emma watched in silence. She had never seen him like this before. The ease in his smile, the softness in his eyes, the warmth in his deep voice. "You seem pretty good at that," she said, before realizing the words had escaped her mouth. Ethan glanced up, amused. "Well, I do have a degree in architecture, but apparently my block-building skills are far more impressive." They both laughed, the first shared laughter that didn't feel forced or cautious. After that, things between them began to flow naturally. Ethan started coming home earlier, sometimes bringing pastries for Liam. He'd tell short stories from his day, and Emma would listen, close enough to care, far enough to stay safe. One evening, as the setting sun painted the sky gold outside the window, Ethan said quietly, "Strange. I used to think I liked silence, but I think I was wrong." Emma looked up from the cloth in her hands, their eyes meeting. In his, she saw something unfamiliar, a quiet sadness mixed with a yearning for connection. "Maybe the house just needed a little laughter," she replied softly. Ethan nodded with a faint smile. Liam laughed at that very moment, hugging his stuffed bear tight, and in that fleeting instant, Emma realized, sometimes tenderness doesn't come from words of love, but from the way someone makes your heart feel at peace. Time passed, and the house by the sea was no longer cold. With each passing day, Emma and Liam seemed to breathe new life into Ethan's quiet world. He laughed more, spoke more, and sometimes even shared dinner with them in the warm glow of the kitchen, filled with the scent of freshly baked bread. But just when everything felt too perfect, the whispers began. One Saturday afternoon, on her way home from work, Emma met Linda, a housekeeper from a nearby mansion. They sat together at the bus stop, chatting idly, until Linda leaned closer and said in a low, deliberate voice, "Emma, I heard Mr. Miller's been looking into adoption procedures. Do you know anything about that?" Emma froze. "No, he's never mentioned it." Linda shrugged, her expression serious. "Men like him, wealthy, alone, sometimes they want a child to fill the silence. Just be careful, okay? Don't let kindness blind you." The words pierced through Emma's chest like a slow, quiet ache. She forced a smile, but unease had already settled deep inside her. That night, while tucking Liam into bed, she couldn't stop her thoughts from spiraling. Why was Ethan so invested in her child? Why did he buy toys, cook meals, or spend hours playing with him as if he were his own? "He's just being kind," she whispered to herself, stroking Liam's soft hair. "He's a good man." But even she didn't believe it completely. The next day at work, a white envelope caught her eye on Ethan's desk. She hadn't meant to look, but the printed header drew her attention immediately. "Adoption and Family Law Consultation. Miller and Associates." Her heart sank. Linda's words echoed again, louder this time. That afternoon, when Ethan entered the kitchen and smiled at her, Emma responded only with a polite nod. He sensed the shift, the distance, but chose silence. And from that moment, Emma began to build an invisible wall around her heart. Because sometimes doubt doesn't need proof, only fear. And fear, once planted, can quietly destroy everything it touches. That afternoon, the sky was heavy with clouds, the ocean wind howling against the windows. After cleaning the stairs, Emma looked up at the second-floor hallway, where the door Ethan always kept locked stood slightly ajar. It had never been opened before. A chill crept through the air. She hesitated, her heart quickening. Then, drawn by a quiet, uneasy instinct, she reached for the handle and pushed it open. The sight froze her in place. It was a perfectly furnished nursery, painted in soft blue, the warm glow of the setting sun falling across every delicate detail. A small wooden crib, shelves filled with plush toys, a mobile hanging from the ceiling. But what made her blood run cold was the name Liam hanging on the wall, carved in neat white letters like it had always belonged there. "No," she whispered, voice trembling. She stepped inside, her knees weak. Inside the closet hung clothes exactly her son's size, neatly folded. On the dresser sat a framed photograph. Liam smiling in the garden, the picture clearly taken without her noticing. The room spun, her heartbeat thundered in her ears. All the warnings, all the doubts came crashing down like a wave. Linda was right. Ethan was planning to take her child. "Oh, God," she gasped, stepping back, hand clutching her chest. "I trusted him." Flashes of memories flickered, Ethan's gentle smiles, the way he carried Liam, the tenderness in his voice. All of it now felt like a lie, a trap she hadn't seen coming. She rushed down the stairs, tears spilling freely. Liam sat on the living room floor, laughing softly to himself, unaware of his mother's fear. Emma scooped him up, holding him so tight it hurt. "We're leaving, sweetheart. Right now." She set him down long enough to scribble a note, her shaking hand barely forming the words. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, but I can't continue working here. Please don't try to find us." She left the letter on the kitchen counter beside the house key, grabbed Liam, and fled into the night. The wind cut across her face, sharp with salt and cold. The narrow coastal road stretched into darkness, the crash of waves echoing like a heartbeat. Liam whimpered softly against her shoulder, and Emma whispered over and over, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's got you." She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away, far away, from that house, from him, from the fear clawing at her chest. Each step echoed the primal terror of a mother ready to fight the whole world for her child. That night, back in their tiny apartment, Emma locked the door, slid down against it, and held Liam close as he slept. Her body shook with silent sobs. "No one's going to take you from me. Ever." The dim light washed over her tear-streaked face, a mother's face caught between love and despair. Emma believed she had saved her son, but she didn't know that in doing so, she had also shattered the only fragile trust that could have saved them both. 3 weeks had passed since the night Emma fled with Liam. The days had dragged on, heavy and colorless, as if time itself was punishing her for her fear. The small apartment felt suffocating. Liam woke often at night, crying softly, calling out, "Dee Dee," through tears. Each time, Emma held him close and whispered, "No, sweetheart, Dee Dee isn't coming back." But deep down, she didn't believe herself. She missed Ethan, his gentle voice, his quiet laughter, the way he made Liam smile. That smile had become a rare thing now. That afternoon, with the salty wind whispering through the window, came a knock at the door. Once, then twice. Emma froze. Her heart pounded. When she opened the door, Ethan stood there, thinner, paler, with dark circles beneath his eyes. But his gaze still carried the same quiet sincerity. Before Emma could speak, Liam shouted joyfully, "Dee Dee!" He ran forward, wrapping his little arms around Ethan's legs, laughing like he'd just found the world again. Ethan knelt down, his voice breaking. "Hey there, little hero." Emma stood still, torn between relief and fear. "Why are you here, Ethan?" He looked up, voice trembling slightly. "To say the things I should have said long ago." They sat at the small kitchen table. Liam played nearby, humming to himself, the innocence in his laughter cutting through the tension. Ethan began slowly, carefully. "I know why you left. I know why you were afraid. But that room, it wasn't what you think." Emma's hands clenched tightly together. "Then what was it, Ethan? Why were there clothes my son's size, toys, his name on the wall, and his photo? What else could I think?" Ethan's eyes lowered. "Because 5 years ago I had a family too. My wife, Clara, was 8 months pregnant with our son when it happened." His voice faltered. "A drunk driver ran a red light. Clara didn't survive. Neither did the baby." Silence filled the room, thick and unbroken. "We'd already chosen a name for him. Liam," Ethan continued with a faint, broken smile. "That room upstairs was meant for him. Clara painted the walls herself, picked out every toy. After the accident, I locked the door. For 5 years, I couldn't even look at it." Emma's eyes glistened with tears. Ethan's words came softer now, trembling but honest. "When I met your Liam, when I heard his name, for the first time in years, it didn't hurt. It felt like a light had come back into my life. I wasn't trying to replace anyone. I just wanted to breathe again, to remember what happiness sounded like." He ran a hand over his face, voice barely above a whisper. "I reopened the room not to forget, but to heal. I wanted to turn that space of grief into a place of warmth again. A room filled with laughter, not silence." Emma covered her mouth, tears streaming down. Everything that once terrified her now made painful, beautiful sense. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered, "I thought you wanted to take him from me. I was so wrong." Ethan shook his head gently. "No, Emma. You did what any mother would do. You protected your child. That's what love looks like. I just wanted to give a bit of it back, not take it away." From the floor, Liam giggled, holding up his toy car. "Dee Dee, play." Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes glimmering. "See? He still trusts me. He doesn't see fear, only kindness." Emma broke down, sobbing quietly. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I let my fear destroy everything we had." Ethan stood, walked to her side, and rested a hand on her shoulder. "If you still want me gone, I'll go. But please know, Everything I did came from love, not loss." Emma looked up, meeting his gaze, those tired, honest eyes. "You don't have to go," she whispered. "Just stay. Let me learn to trust again." Ethan smiled, a bittersweet curve of relief and forgiveness. He bent down, opening his arms just as Liam ran to him, laughing freely once more. Sunlight poured through the window, soft and golden, wrapping around them like a quiet promise. Emma watched, tears shimmering, and whispered, "Maybe that room wasn't built for memories, but for second chances." Ethan nodded, eyes glistening. "And this time, no one has to leave." Outside, the sea murmured gently against the shore, the tide washing away the remnants of fear, leaving only peace behind. And in that small apartment, where 3 broken hearts sat together, the truth finally became forgiveness. And forgiveness, love. In the days that followed, the air in the small apartment began to soften again. Ethan started visiting often, bringing small things, a box of pastries, fresh fruit, or just his quiet, reassuring smile that somehow made the place feel less empty. At first, Emma remained cautious. Though the misunderstanding had faded, a trace of fear lingered. But Ethan never pushed. He simply stayed, patient, gentle, moving carefully as if one wrong step might make her disappear again. One weekend morning, as Liam played on the balcony, Ethan stood beside Emma by the window. The ocean murmured softly in the distance. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for coming back, for not being angry." Ethan smiled faintly, his tone low and warm. "I could never be angry at you, Emma. A mother's fear is her love in its strongest form. I understand that better than anyone." Her head bowed. "I doubted you. I left without listening. I'm so sorry, Ethan." He said nothing for a moment, then his hand rested gently on her shoulder. Forgiveness isn't hard when you understand the reason for the fear. What's hard is forgiving yourself, but you've already begun to do that. Emma looked up. His eyes held no resentment, only compassion, deep and steady, like calm water after a storm. Weeks later, Mrs. Wallace came by to visit. She found Ethan helping Liam stack puzzle pieces on the rug, and her eyes softened with quiet joy. Pulling Emma aside, she whispered, "My dear, some people don't come into our lives to take something away. They come to return what life once stole. Don't let fear stop you from being happy again." Those words lingered long after the evening fell. That night, as Ethan was about to leave, Emma stopped him at the door. "Ethan." He turned, waiting. I missed you too." The words were simple, but in their simplicity lay every unspoken emotion. Ethan's smile was slow, filled with warmth that reached his tired eyes. He took a step closer, his voice quiet, steady, and heartbreakingly sincere. "And I love you both. You and Liam have reminded me of what I thought I'd lost forever, the meaning of living, of loving, of having a family." Emma's breath trembled, tears welled in her eyes, but her lips curved into a smile, the first genuine one in a long time. At that moment, Liam came running toward them, clapping his small hands, shouting joyfully, "Family! Family!" They laughed through tears. Ethan lifted Liam into his arms, and Emma stood beside them, her heart light and full. For the first time, everything felt right. Peaceful. The sea breeze swept through the open window, carrying the scent of salt and sunlight. Ethan glanced at her and said softly, "Maybe this is our second chance." Emma nodded. "And this time, I'm not running anymore." There they stood, a man who had lost, a woman who had feared, and a child who had unknowingly brought them both back to life. And between them, the pain of the past no longer divided. It simply bore witness to the quiet, beautiful truth of healing. The sea was still there, calm, vast, and eternal, standing as a silent witness to every change life could bring. Since the day Emma decided to stay, more than 2 months had passed. It wasn't a long time, yet it was enough to mend the cracks left by fear and loss. The house by the shore, once filled with cold winds and silence, now overflowed with laughter. Mornings began with the scent of fresh coffee, the sound of Liam's tiny footsteps echoing down the hall, and Ethan's voice calling softly, "Good morning, buddy. Come give Daddy a hug." Liam giggled, climbing into his arms. "Up, up!" Ethan laughed. "All right, little boss, up we go." Emma smiled quietly from the kitchen as their voices intertwined, one deep, one high, blending like 2 notes finally finding harmony. Sometimes, as Ethan carried Liam on his shoulders along the sand, Emma watched them from afar and thought, maybe fate isn't about what we lose, but what finds its way back to us in another form. The upstairs room, once dark and locked away, now shimmered with light. The cold blue walls had been repainted in warm golden hues. Emma hung new photos, Liam laughing in the garden, Ethan carrying him on his shoulders, the 3 of them sharing dinner under soft candlelight. On a wooden shelf sat a single old frame, a picture of Clara, Ethan's late wife. One afternoon, as Emma dusted the shelf, she stopped before the photograph. The woman in the picture had the gentlest eyes. "She's beautiful," Emma whispered. Ethan entered, smiling faintly. "She was the only light I had. After she was gone, I turned everything off, until you and Liam showed up." Emma turned to him, the sunset painting her hair with golden fire. "Maybe she sent us to remind you. Light never disappears. It just finds a new place to rest." Ethan gazed at her, his voice soft as the tide. "And now that light lives here." A month later, they held a small ceremony on the beach. No grand dresses, no orchestra, only the sea, the wind, and a few dear friends. Mrs. Wallace, some neighbors, and those who had witnessed their storm. Emma wore a simple white dress, her hair flowing freely. Ethan, in an ivory suit, looked quietly radiant. Liam, the special best man, wore a tiny blue bow tie and the brightest smile in the world. When the officiant asked, "Ethan, do you promise to take this woman's hand, to share with her every joy and sorrow for the rest of your days?" Ethan squeezed Emma's hand and looked into her eyes. His voice trembled slightly, but his words were firm. "I do. From the moment she walked into my life, everything changed. She taught me that true love doesn't come to replace. It comes to heal." When it was Emma's turn, her eyes shimmered with tears. "I used to fear love, to fear loss, to fear trust. But you stayed, quietly, patiently, and kindly, until I was brave enough to open my heart again. Thank you, Ethan, for choosing me, and for choosing my son." They both turned to Liam, the little boy waving his hands at the sea, laughter sparkling in his eyes. Ethan bent down, lifting him into his arms. "Got anything you'd like to say, champ?" Liam threw his hands high into the air and shouted with pure joy, "Family!" Laughter erupted around them. The waves lapped gently at their feet, as if the ocean itself was clapping in celebration of 3 hearts finally finding one another. That night, after the ceremony, the house by the sea glowed with a warm golden light, not just from the lamps, but from peace. Liam slept soundly in his bed, his tiny hands clutching his favorite teddy bear. Emma entered quietly, tucking him in. The boy mumbled sleepily, "Mommy, Daddy, Liam, family." She smiled through her tears, turning toward Ethan, who stood at the doorway, watching with quiet contentment. "He remembers every little thing," she whispered. "Because he knows he's loved," Ethan replied. They stepped out to the balcony. The moonlight shimmered across the sea, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and the softness of memories that no longer hurt. Ethan's voice was low, steady, almost like a song. I once thought love was something you could only lose once, but you and Liam showed me that love never really dies. It just waits for another chance to live again. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. And sometimes that chance comes when we've stopped believing in it. He turned, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. You're the miracle I never dared to ask for, but was given anyway. A wave crashed softly on the shore, scattering foam like petals, washing away their footprints. Ethan took her hand, firm and warm. Love isn't about replacing what's gone. It's about having the courage to begin again. Emma smiled, tears glistening but no longer heavy. And we really have begun again, haven't we? Ethan nodded, eyes glowing. Yes, this time no one has to leave. She wrapped her arms around him and whispered, Thank you, Ethan, for showing me that sometimes the hearts that have been broken the most are the ones that love the deepest. He smiled, holding her tighter. Inside, Liam stirred slightly in his sleep and smiled, as if he knew, even in dreams, that everything was finally as it should be. Outside, the moon lit up the calm sea, its reflection spilling across the window where they stood. A chapter had quietly closed, and in the soft rhythm of the night, beneath the whisper of the waves, a new beginning had truly begun, not only for Emma and Ethan, but for every heart that once believed it would never be loved again. 5 years later, the house by the sea still stood bathed in golden light, its windows glimmering with the reflection of the waves. But inside, it was no longer just the laughter of a little boy echoing down the halls. Now there was another voice, softer, higher, like a songbird greeting the morning. Daddy! Daddy, look! Tiny Ella Miller, with her wild curls and sky-blue eyes, ran barefoot across the living room, waving a seashell she had found on the beach. Ethan turned from the kitchen, his smile widening. That's beautiful, sweetheart. The ocean must have sent it just for you. For me and Liam, she declared proudly, running to her brother. Liam, now 7, grinned as he took the shell and held it up to his ear. You can hear the waves, he told her. Ella gasped. Really? Listen, Liam said, whispering. It says, I love you. Emma leaned against the doorframe, watching them, her 2 children, so full of life it made her chest ache with joy. Ethan came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. She's exactly like you, he murmured. Stubborn, curious, and far too smart for her age. Emma smiled. And she's got your eyes. And your patience. Thank God for that. The morning sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the family of 4 gathered around the kitchen table. There were pancake crumbs, spilled juice, and laughter, the beautiful kind of chaos that comes only from love. After breakfast, they packed a small picnic basket, sandwiches, orange juice, and Liam's favorite cookies, and walked down to the shore together. Liam chased the tide, his laughter ringing out over the sand, while Ethan lifted Ella onto his shoulders. She stretched her arms toward the sky, shouting, Higher, Daddy! I can touch the clouds! Emma watched them, heart swelling with quiet gratitude. 5 years ago, she had run from this very place in fear. Now it was her home, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, because it was theirs. As the sun began to rise higher, Ethan turned to her and said softly, Do you remember what I told you once? That love isn't about replacing what we've lost. It's about the courage to begin again. Emma nodded, her eyes glistening. And we began again, together. He smiled, pulling her close as the sea breeze swept around them. Liam ran back, wrapping his arms around both parents, and Ella followed, giggling as the 4 of them stood there, hands intertwined, feet sinking into the cool sand. Above them, The gulls soared across a sky the color of forgiveness. Behind them, the house gleamed in the sunlight, the same house that once held sorrow, now filled with life, laughter, and the promise of tomorrow. For the first time in a long, long while, Emma whispered not a prayer of fear, but of thanks. "This," she said, smiling through her tears, "this is everything." And as the waves rose and fell, time itself seemed to pause, honoring the simple truth they had all come to understand, that love, when given a second chance, doesn't just heal, it multiplies.